Yeah, thank you.
Welcome to Dungeons & Dragons 335, an analysis of D20 role-playing games.
It's mostly statistical analysis, so I hope you all brought your logarithmic calculators.
It's amazing how much Dungeons & Dragons appeals to, like, the math nerd in me.
Yeah.
Like, always wanting to break down percentages. And I feel like it was helpful in learning percentages and like really having them stick so I could quickly call them up. So like now, like even things like figuring out tips or like anything, any like quick arithmetic has become easier.
What's a sixth of, you know?
Right, yeah, breaking things into six, breaking things into eighths, even like 12, like even like the weird 12-sided die, like breaking down probability, like knowing that like 1 in 12 is like 8.5%.
Yeah.
Because 12 times 8.5 gets you back to 100.
Shout out to the original master Plato. For the,
yeah.
Seriously.
But I think that was probably. We should introduce ourselves. I'm just already like talking about shit. You start down here.
All right. I am Frank, and I'm the DM for Heroes and Halfwits.
I'm Gus. I'm just a longtime Dungeons & Dragons fan.
Yeah, Adam Thompson. I run Unicorn Rampant Publishing. Check out Claw Claw Bite on social media everywhere. We're doing a promotion where we just published Class of 1980X, The Adventure. Friday night at like 1 a.m. And so retweets, reposts, get a chance to win a free copy.
Nice.
So I'm Dan Schneider, and I DM for Funhouse show Twits and Crits. Thanks for having me. I'm pretty new to this world, so I appreciate you guys bringing me along.
So what was, how long, I guess we should talk about our respective histories with Dungeons & Dragons and how we got involved. So I think that was a good segue. Like
a good segue to the guy that has no history.
Yeah, well, I think it's a good experience for people maybe who don't know much about Dungeons & Dragons.
Sure.
How did you get started?
I think that's probably one of the best things about Twits and Crits is it's a bunch of people other than Elise. Like we'd never played D&D before. So I think maybe a month before RTX last year, they greenlit the show. And it's like, okay, let's learn how to play Dungeons & Dragons. Which was pretty intense for 2 months. But yeah.
How did you go about that? Like I've been playing so long, I can't remember how, well, I do vaguely remember how I got started, but how do you, going from not having played, like what was your process to learn about it?
Well, you know, I got a stack of books about this tall, which is extremely overwhelming. So I don't know, you start reading those, but I think the real magic with learning D&D today is there's so many shows like ours on YouTube or anywhere on the internet. You can watch people that are amazing at the gameplay. So in, you know, half an hour, you can watch YouTube video, learn pretty much how to play the game without reading 500 pages of text. You at least get the gist enough to play the game. You know, I'm not the super math nerd or the 30 years of rules. I don't have that in my head. So we're kind of winging it a lot, which I think makes us a little bit different than you guys' shows.
Well, I think that's also helpful because you don't have a lot of the old rule baggage in the back of your head. Like still when we're playing to this day, I'll say like, no, that's not the way it works. Isn't it this way? And then you're like, oh no, that got changed.
Yeah, it's changed for 5e.
One of the editions, like, oh right, that mechanic is gone. It's been replaced by this. Yeah. So it's good, I think, to approach it from a fresh perspective.
We don't really get logged up in the rules or dragged down in that stuff. And maybe that's just my style to just move on from it and make it up. And no one at the table knows, so they can't call me on it. Like, like you'll call Frank on some rule that he got wrong, but no one at my table can do that. So there's an advantage, I guess.
No, that's a great way to run it. You know, it's classic pitfall to be like, oh, wait, how exactly does this work? And then you spend, you know, half an hour looking stuff up and arguing. It's just like total buzzkill. So.
What about you, Adam? What was your history? What has your history been, and what was your introduction into Dungeons & Dragons?
Well, I'll never forget. I was like 7 years old, and at summer camp, and a couple guys were just like, they were just playing with no dice. You know, one guy was dungeon master, the other guy was playing a wizard, and they were just describing it. You know, it's like, oh, hey, there's a crystal on this pillar. What do you do? Oh, I cast magic missile. Oh, it doesn't do anything. La, da, da. And I was just fascinated. I was like, what are you guys doing? You know, they're like, it's Dungeons & Dragons. And so I went out and got the red box set. I've been playing since then, on and off. You know, it's been awesome. Just the best thing ever. I love it.
The red box set, was that original Advanced Dungeons & Dragons?
That was basic Dungeons & Dragons. So when they published Advanced D&D in the 80s, they also put out a basic version, which is a lot like the box sets that they put out these days. You know, it's like simplified rules, all in one box, kind of cheap. Back then they sold it in toy stores and stuff too, but it's a great way to get started. A lot of people who have been tweeting with me about this panel and stuff and about Class of 1980X have said that they're new to the game and that, how can I get started playing? I want to have fun like you guys are. And that's one of the best ways is those box sets that they're putting out now, the starter sets.
They have that starter box that really is a brilliant way to start the game. And it is the first time I ever played, I basically bought that and sat down with the one person I could find that could DM and ran some of us through the game. And it was really, throws you through the mechanics really quickly. It has everything made for you. It really is, if you're interested in learning how to play, just go buy that $15 box.
Yeah, it's like the tutorial mission,
Yeah, the first hour of whatever RPG.
I'm going to skip my introduction because it's tied to Frank. So I'm going to let Frank tell his introduction first, and I'll come back to me.
Okay. So the first time I ever actually played was in 5th grade when I was living in Houston, and I got into it because there was a friend of mine who was like super nerd, which is probably why we became friends. He knew so much about everything, and so
his name was Gus, right?
That came later. We'll get to that in a second.
So I started playing I think I actually skipped the box set. He had the box set, but for whatever reason, we never used it. I don't know why. But then we went into Advanced Dungeons and Dragons and played that. And then how Gus and I got into it was in high school. I had moved to this border town called Eagle Pass, and I met Gus, who's also a super nerd. And we actually met in science class, which I think is kind of so apropos. And then we had
physical science, right?
I think so, yeah.
7th grade.
No, it was 9th grade then.
9th grade, yeah. And the only reason we became friends, actually, like a little digression, is I was late to that class. Like I lost my schedule first day of high school.
How unfrank.
Yeah. Stumbling into it. But yeah, so the only like desk left in that class was right next to Gus.
And ironically, at the time, I only had one friend, and he and I were not on speaking terms, so I needed a new one.
You're pissed at him?
I like that you guys haven't changed since 9th grade.
No, yeah. And that one friend that he wasn't talking to at the time was in that same science class, but like sitting, turned out, several rows away or something.
You took a seat?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Why do you think the only seat left in the class that was empty was the one next to me? I mean, there's a reason for this.
Right.
But we didn't even start playing in 9th grade. I think it was in 10th grade when we met Mr. Rensland, our Latin teacher, who is this young, hip teacher from Austin, Texas. And he mentioned Dungeons & Dragons, and I told him I had played before, but it had been a few years at that point. And he was like, well, I have the books. And he actually had the original first edition books, which, speaking of math, like those books start with, here's what a bell curve is, and here's like...
when you roll 1d6, you have an even probability of hitting each.
Yeah.
If you roll 2d6, it's a bell curve distribution of probability. Like, oh my god.
Yeah, it's like, what the hell? And, it was like, the rules are so complex, too. Like, there's speed factors for weapons. And
everything was hit table based.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
a
Good
lot of
stuff.
fun. Real fun way to spend a Friday night when you're a sophomore in high school.
Consulting charts.
So yeah, we started playing Dungeons & Dragons that way, and obviously it was not ideal because it was the old original Dungeons & Dragons and was just not very well optimized. I think there were 3 classes, and
There were sections in the rules that were like half written too.
so
Speed factor stuff.
what we ended up doing was whenever we'd go on academic competition trips, we would travel up to like San Antonio or Austin. We would always try to stop at half-price books and see, what selection of Dungeons & Dragons books they had. And there's a couple bucks because they're used books, so we'd buy whatever we could. We didn't have a lot of money, so it's like, okay, you buy a player's handbook, you buy a Dungeon Master Guide, you buy a monster manual, and then we just kind of like pieced together.
Someone bought some dice at some point, too.
Yeah, the Chessex dice that came in like that vial.
Yeah.
And we just kind of pieced together and started playing that way. So it's been about 24 or 25 years, like I said, I've been playing Dungeons & Dragons. And I played, starting with basic D&D. We moved on to AD&D. We did 2nd edition. We did 3rd. I did a little bit of 3.5, then I stopped. And now with Heroes and Halfwits, I came back into 5th.
So you skipped 4th edition?
I skipped 4th entirely.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah, good call.
I really liked 3rd a lot. I thought it was really good.
Well, that was like the renaissance of D&D, like it had been you know, through the 90s, you had sort of World of Darkness and some of those other games, but TSR had gone out of business, and, you know, Magic the Gathering came out, Wizards of the Coast came on the scene, and they put out 3rd edition with the open game license, which was just changed everything for role-playing games.
Yeah, so it was great because in 2nd edition, all of your hits and all of your combat was THAC0 based.
Oh yeah, all the rest of the math was all backwards still.
So then transitioning into 3rd to a D20 system, which was then an open system that other games could use.
Yeah,
made
that's when we started publishing it, Unicorn Rampant. Yeah.
Everything became much easier to figure out. You didn't necessarily have to carry around all your obscure dice with you all the time.
Right.
But
Leave your D30 at home.
the reason that in Heroes and Halfwits that Borealis carries a great axe around is I wanted an excuse to still have to use my 12-sided die occasionally. Because otherwise, like, there's no reason to have that die. It's like, I want to have a weapon that every now and then I get to roll a d12.
Oh, yeah. Nice.
I assume everyone has a favorite character or campaign or something that you've done in the past. What is it, and what was it that drew you to that?
I mean, actually, it's real cool. Bunch of the Funhouse guy, the editing team, started playing D&D about 2 months ago. Really, the first time I've played a campaign, so that will be my favorite. Editor John at Funhouse started DMing for us. Thank God I didn't have to do it again. But it's been a blast to play like this druid named Ando, who's super quiet, so I don't have to talk a lot. Yeah, there's a few of the guys we play with, so. It's a blast, and John's he's doing a homebrew world where everything is an animal pretty much. There are no humans or orcs really walking around, so it's a lot of talking animals, which makes it seem like a creepy Disney movie. I guess that would be my favorite one so far, since it's the only one that I've really played. It is enlightening though, finally getting to play and not
being on the other side of the screen.
Yeah, you can fuck with the DM and stuff.
Well, it's interesting going from your perspective, right? Like having run a campaign to then playing. Because when we started, since Frank was the only one who had played, we had him be our DM. And for the longest time, we never got to look at a Dungeon Master's guide. So we didn't necessarily know the magic behind the scenes. We knew that he had a screen with stuff, and there was stuff in that other book, but we couldn't look at it.
Yeah. He made it way more mysterious than it should have been.
Well, I think it was probably to make things easier for him on the rule side of things. Like you say, so there's no rule lawyering and no arguing.
Well, and in 1st edition, if you read, Gary Gygax did a lot of editorializing in the books. And actually, there's lots of really good advice in those 1st edition books for how to run a game. But yeah, he said explicitly, you know, like, don't necessarily let the players look at this book or the monster manual either, you know, keep it under wraps.
Yeah, he would cover the pages with the stats in the monster manual and would just show us like illustrations and photos, like this is what you see, but we couldn't see any of the actual information in the book.
It's fun. It's kind of funny too, because that Gary Gygax did so much editorializing that it actually made the game a lot easier to play too, not just to run. And so he would run through these like multi-page examples in the DMG of like, okay, you have these players. You know, he just makes up like names of players, and he just runs through this fictional scenario. But it makes so much more sense because he's incorporating like rules like initiative and to hit rolls and damage and speed factors and all that stuff. So I always felt like that section at least should have been put in the players as well.
It seems to be something that's missing in those 5e books. There's not a lot of those example situations.
Yeah, there really aren't.
Sort through.
Yeah.
Mm.
But we have YouTube now, right? So.
Yeah.
What about you, Adam?
It's hard to say. You know, I've been playing since I was, you know, in elementary school, basically on and off. I've played in a lot of campaigns. I've dungeon mastered mainly, so, and I do a lot of homebrew stuff. So, you know, my own setting is dear to my heart. But lately, I've been refereeing a lot of Traveler, which is a science fiction game. It's a lot of fun. Yeah, Traveler.
There's that guy.
Traveler fan. Probably one of the standout characters was actually a game that Frank ran, where, and I forget the name of it, but it was the one with the comet. Yeah,
Spelljammer campaign.
Yes, Spelljammer. So it's like D&D in space, right? So a little bit like Class of 1980X. You know, you get some of that weirdo, this isn't fantasy stuff going on. But my character was he was a ghost of a killed warrior who had inhabited this tree that he made come to life. Yeah. And so he was like this tree guy who couldn't talk, you know, until the very end of the
Yeah.
game. He like finally broke out and had his revenge.
Just said his name over and over. Right?
Leroy. No. So that was a lot of fun to play a character like that, something a little different, you know, where provided an interesting challenge to communicate.
Chalkboard.
Yeah, eventually I got tired with trying to, you know, halfway.
It was very difficult.
Yeah, communicate with people. So he finally got a chalkboard and he'd write things out, carry it around on his chest. But
That's dedication, man.
yeah, it was fun. It was
Yeah.
fun too. Fun challenge. And that was a great game.
Thanks.
It's always hard for me to think about and pick favorites. You know, obviously, I go back to like one of the first characters I ever played.
Come on, Velios.
He's good. I'm gonna get to him eventually. But like one of the first characters I ever played was a rogue named Mordak, who failed an ability check, fell into a pit with a Remmer Haas, failed a saving throw. His party refused to help him.
Eaten alive.
He got eaten alive.
Yes.
By the Remmer Haas. And like that was the first time when you have to reconcile anger in the game versus anger in real life at someone for
Right.
refusing to help you.
They're like, we're not going down there to die with you. Sorry.
Whatever.
Still mad.
Still mad. But another one of my favorites is the one you're alluding to, where I played with Adam
Yeah,
and
this was
Frank
my first homebrew campaign when
Yeah.
3.5 came out.
and some other
third
folks.
edition.
I think we started in third, and then we transitioned to 3.5. And I wanted to do something a little different, like kind of like what you're saying. Like by this point, I'd play a lot of D&D. It's like I want to do something different. So I worked with the DM, and I said, I'm going to roll a rogue, but I'm going to trick everyone else into thinking I'm a fighter, and I'm going to be stealing from the party the entire time, and they're not going to know that I'm stealing from them.
It's great stuff. This is the type of like behind the scenes inter-party stuff that I love in a game. It's just, it adds so much spice to it.
So then, of course, people don't realize that they're missing gear until we're in combat, and they reach for something. It's
Like,
like,
where's my potion of
you
healing?
don't have that potion. Like, what? And then again, this goes back to
But then Velios was helpful. You know, if somebody really needed it, he'd
Yeah.
be like, oh well, I've got a spare one.
Was
They
this
got
the
to-
same guy they left at the bottom of a pit?
no.
Okay.
I didn't play with that guy again after that, actually. But it got to the point where, again, we're dealing with reconciling real-world anger with in-game anger. It got to the point where the party casts a zone of truth because they suspected I was a thief, but I made every save and lied to them in the zone of truth and had them believing I was still a fighter, and they had no idea what the hell was going on.
Beautiful. It was great. Great stuff.
That was a really fun one.
That was very fun. Was that the one that you the player almost got punched in the face about, or that was that a different character?
I think that was the same character, but a different session.
Much
Yeah.
later.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was an asshole.
Yeah.
Well-
and we were pretty
well,
drunk.
But yeah, exactly. To be fair, there was a lot of alcohol involved. That the session later, much later,
we were-
where Gus almost got punched in the face. I don't even remember now exactly what triggered it. It was something about a sword.
No, yeah. Well,
And-
Gus and another player had found some loot, and you know the other player was really drunk, and
Yeah.
there was an
Wanted-
argument about who got the.
Who
And
got
at
Yeah, I
my
think it was a
sword.
couple potions, you know, minor stuff.
Yeah.
At my heart, I'm a rogue. Like, I wanted to collect all of that
Yeah.
stuff, and I wasn't going to let go of it.
A couple strong-willed people in a clash of personalities.
Yes.
Yeah. So the moral of the story is don't drink when you're playing Dungeons and
I mean,
Dragons.
in moderation, maybe.
No, drinking's bad, kids. Don't do it.
Actually, I really do love the inter-party conflict because as long as there isn't it doesn't devolve into fisticuffs, it is really fun, and you can I think it deepens the story because it goes from just a game of hack and slash, which you could do in a video game, to something much more interesting where it's interactive storytelling and you're with live human beings, and that stuff is where it becomes, like you said, really spicy because it adds to the story too.
To an extent, and I'm gonna quickly sidetrack you here with a little counter example. Is you want to make sure that it's fun and it's in story and it doesn't devolve into rules lawyering. Because we've definitely played with people like that. It's like, well, no, this and that, and it's all about
I cast dominate person on your character.
right. It's all about min-maxing and kind of very much trying to break the game.
That's true. That's a huge pitfall. But then I would say as long as you have a DM worth their salt who can moderate that, then it can actually become really interesting. Because also those players that min max, they kind of forget that the spirit of the game is meant to be fun, and ultimately the dungeon master gets the final say in what happens. So Yeah.
You just have
So-
to convince them of that.
That's
Yeah.
true. Yeah. I mean, and we, Gus and Adam and I have been in games where players have left because they were just so interested in min-maxing that it wasn't fun anymore for the rest of the party.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
What about you? Do you have a favorite character or experience?
you almost getting punched in the face is definitely a favorite. God, that guy, like he after he tried to punch you, he left that night and wrapped his car around a tree.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh man.
Yeah.
He was fine
bad
though.
choice.
Like no one was physically hurt amazingly. So now that's why I can laugh about it. But yeah, I guess one of my favorite characters is the Coyote. He was this swordsman that wielded 2 katanas and was chaotic neutral to the hilt. So he was just
Complete madman. That was the same
Yeah.
campaign.
Yeah.
The
Velios was stealing from him.
yeah. Actually, I think the Coyote and Velios actually got along.
They were because
So-
your character was chaotic neutral, and what I was doing was very
Chaotic.
chaotic.
Yeah,
so
no, they're Team Chaos over there. That was pretty good. That was a great campaign. We took it all the way from first level to above 20
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
3rd edition, and the Coyote
Oh.
eventually ascended to a sort of a chaotic demigodhood.
That's right. Yeah, he became an agent of chaos before that term was fashionable after the Dark Knight. So yeah, pre-Dark Knight.
So was it just his name was the Coyote? He
Yeah.
wasn't like a coyote man or anything?
No,
Although he got turned into various animals through the campaign. Yeah.
he did eventually. Yeah, he started traveling through like the Beastlands and stuff. Which that was cool because I got to do that off screen. So at one point, I took over as a guest DM in Adam's campaign, and I felt like, it wouldn't really be fair if I'm running the Coyote and doing this high-level campaign. So I just basically had him like go get lost in the
Vision
plains
Quest.
and and then just did some Beastland stuff. And I think I wrote up some stories about that too. But I was gonna say, so in that campaign, one of my favorite moments ever is Adam as the DM. Just totally nerfed us so bad. But it was awesome. Like I really love that. We had gotten to be like 15th level or something. Like
Yeah, and
pretty
that-
epic levels.
At that point,
And-
they've got so much loot and power. You kind of have
Yeah.
to take them down a notch sometimes.
Yeah, and this is 3.5 where the rules for magic weapons and magic items is like could be like really overpowered. And so we'd accumulated all this great loot, and we were fighting a demon worshipper.
Yeah.
And,
He's the kind of arch nemesis of that campaign arc.
Yeah, he had been like is like a story arc where he was just messing with us for a long time. So anyway, final battle, we're fighting him in his fortress or whatever, and he casts a spell that none of us had ever seen used in a game before called Mordenkainen's Disjunction.
Yeah, it's
And-
the last resort.
Yeah, it was great though. So basically, in the 3.5 rules, that meant that you had to roll a saving throw for each one of your magic items, and if you failed, the magic is completely nulled and
Brutal.
Yeah, it was
Yeah,
awesome.
it-
And the other thing is the whole setup was a trap. They had fought him all the way through his demon-filled lair, and then his like escape hatch was a portal to the abyss, to like hell. And so he like had them chase him through the portal, and then he cast Mordenkainen's Disjunction. All their magic items were destroyed. The portal closed, and they had to walk their way out of hell without all of their stuff.
The abyss is also, by the way, known as the infinite layers of the abyss. So you could walk forever and never get out. And we had some of our magic items survived. So we had
It was a very
few,
small amount.
Yeah, a few items, but yeah, and definitely most when you're in the abyss fighting demons, like if you don't have a magic item, you can't really.
Oh yeah, Velios was running out of arrows and he was like having to make new ones and stuff.
Yeah.
It was
Yeah.
great.
And
great stuff. That's one of those aspects of the game that was really emphasized more in like AD&D, but the resource management,
Yeah.
like it's especially with short rests and recharges and stuff, it's not as much part of the game anymore, but especially at low level, it can be a really fun challenge.
But and the one player who almost punched Gus in the face got so mad when all the magic items got nerfed. And I was living with, he was my roommate.
He was the
and
total most OP character.
he
as
was.
well.
He really was. And then we were living in, he was my roommate. We were playing at our house for that session, and he just got up and he was like, "This is bullshit," and just stormed out.
Same thing he did the
slammed
first time his
door.
character got killed.
Yeah. But anyway, one of my
So
favorite moments.
you bring up an interesting point here. Is like when you're DMing and when you're running a game, how do you manage someone like that? Someone who's, maybe super attached to things, and when you've played a game like that that's gone on for many years, people get very attached to their character, they get very attached to their gear. How can you deal with someone who is overly attached? Have you had to deal with anything like that yet? Like, what's the worst thing you've had to deal with like this?
It can turn into like a total table revolt,
True. I don't think we've gotten that far. Generally, I'm way more passive. Like, I let them do way too much at the table and invent things. But I think, was it the beginning of season 2 or season 3? I forget. Basically, Adam Kovic blew up a tower with barrels of explosive powder that didn't exist in the world. He just said he did this, and I was like, okay, I guess you do this, Adam. But he killed like 40 orcs that they were supposed to fight or something like that. So he ruined my plans for the next 4 episodes by inventing explosive barrels, and I'm way, way too lenient. So I was like, all right, sure, Adam, you explode this tower full of all the bad guys you're supposed to fight for the next 4 hours.
It's okay to tell the players no.
I know. I like not to. I know that's like a rule, don't say no, and that's kind of stupid. But I just like to roll with it because they have a lot of fun creating parts of the world.
Well, and actually, that's one of the things that I do a lot now. I used to be a lot more attached to the story that I'd written, and you end up in a situation where you're railroading the players sometimes, especially when they do something creative.
Yeah.
And so, these days I really like to let the players like lead the action. If they come up with an idea, I'm like, okay, give it a shot. Let's see what happens. And sometimes it goes horrible.
I think that shows a lot in 1980X.
Oh yeah. Yeah, well, I mean, I had to with those guys. I mean, you've got 3 guys who've never played before ever at all, and they're all hilarious comedians. And total jackasses. So, in
the best way.
Yeah, I mean, it was so much fun running for them. But yeah, I really had to. The first couple sessions, I was really like, wow, these guys they're never gonna finish this. They're never gonna get out of the mall.
Well, they're all also like 20 years old too, right?
Yeah, sad. But they were so much fun. I loved how much they stayed in character. Just in story, in character the whole time. At each other's throats, messing up everything. It was so much fun. It was great. And I love when things go wrong at the table. When there's some sort of disaster, or they throw you a curveball. And you have to be like, okay, well, all right, okay, I guess that works, but.
No, that because Elise kind of out of nowhere created a subplot that I started running with of this weird animal kingdom nonsense. And we went on for like 2 episodes. I had no plan for what we were doing, but we were just creating this subplot of animals, disaster in all these kingdoms. And we were just laughing our asses off for 2 hours being stupid. I don't think it made any sense when I tried to watch it back. I was there and I couldn't follow the plot. But just kind of rolling with what they do is probably the easiest thing about my job.
So I think out of every campaign that you guys are running, I have to say I think Frank has it the worst because he has to deal with Jeff.
Yeah.
Whose sole goal is to try to derail you and all the work you've done. I think if Jeff knows that you spent hours working for us to go left at a juncture, he's going to insist we go right. Yeah. How do you deal with someone like that who is intent on derailing you every step of the way?
Well, I mean, I shoot up. Yeah. I do a lot of drugs after. Yeah. No.
Real quick, it's funny because we actually spent half an hour at our lunch the other day. We were planning for the crossover yesterday, and we're sitting there spending time thinking about what Jeff's gonna do to ruin our very tightly planned day.
Oh, yeah.
I was actually very amazed that he didn't derail the campaign more yesterday.
No, he was really nice.
No, it's like the improvising rule that you say yes and or
yes but
no
yes but or yeah. I just go with that but then at the same time I am very conscious, especially when we're recording for Heroes and Halfwits. I'm very conscious of the time, and so if things are starting to get derailed too much, then I will try to either. So, just kind of unintentionally, I discovered that the wild magic table rules are perfect for Jeff because whenever he casts a spell, it's like, okay, we'll roll wild magic, and then things will happen. And then, like when in the episode where they met the Green Alchemist, and Jeff started making was basically cock blocking Orma. She was flirting with the Green Alchemist, and then made her fart, and then all the craziness that happened from that was perfect because that affected the other players, and then they intervened and kind of policed Jeff a little bit too. So,
So you farm it out to the rest of the party.
yeah.
Has he always been like this?
Oh
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
pretty much.
Ever since we started playing together, like in the early 2000s, yeah. But he was actually a really, in a way, he made me way better as a DM because I had to deal with that and like learn how to let him kind of go a certain amount, but then also rein it in and keep the story on track.
Yeah.
So yeah, I feel like you mentioned, Adam, railroading, and that's like always been a very interesting topic for me because I think you do have to railroad as a DM to a certain degree, but you can't do it to the point where then the players feel like they have no agency in the game.
Yeah, it's it's kind of one of those false dichotomies. It's not this or that. But I mean, as the dungeon master, you prepared a scenario or a story, and if it's a simple dungeon crawl, that's easy, right? They go in the entrance and there's, they go through the dungeon. There's nowhere else to go, right? But when it's something more freeform, it can be a lot harder, especially to keep them on track, keep the plot moving.
Yeah.
I feel like the Cypher system has a lot of good stuff about that. And Urban Shadows, where they talk about game master interventions, you kind of let the players lead the action, and then occasionally the dungeon master dips in with a little plot point or something, But it's mostly player driven, and I don't know, the players really enjoy that, and it really adds to the, it's kind of a brainstorming session at that point.
Yeah. But it is fun too when the player, like you were pointing out, Dan, like the players take it in a whole new direction. Like your guys' epic shopping trip, that one episode.
It was
like
blown out of proportion. I think what we did was totally reasonable.
Well, no, like that's one of the magic things about a table of people playing D&D. I have like 6 other people that are creative and funny that help generate awesomeness. It's not just on me to do that. You have all these brilliant minds helping make it better. So.
Exactly. Farm out the creativity into the players.
You talked about how it's easier to run people through a dungeon crawl as opposed to a longer story.
Yeah.
And it made me think of this idea I had been pitching to Frank, where I keep telling him that before the Ready Player One movie comes out, that we should all do a run through of Tomb of Horrors.
Oh yeah.
Oh boy.
Oh yeah.
Like with each of the different campaigns, all the different characters going through
Awesome.
to see how all the different groups approach the exact same scenario.
Oh yeah.
See how far they make it.
Right.
Isn't that the goal, is to kill people in Tomb of Horrors?
Well, it's just so deadly. It's
Yeah.
just it's just part of the territory.
Right.
The new
sounds
version
awesome,
is
though.
really good. Have you seen?
Oh, I didn't know there was a new
I've
one.
seen
They reprinted it in
I haven't
the.
played through it yet.
Tales of the Yawning Portal, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, that
It's
one.
got that. It's a pretty sweet book.
Yeah,
Yeah.
It's got a bunch of the classic adventures. The only thing missing from that, in my opinion, is Keep on the Borderlands. That's like the #1 first D&D game you should play if you're looking for something.
I think so. It's weird, like talking about modules, like all of these different things that are so iconic. Because when we were growing up and when we were starting, everything was homebrew. Like we didn't buy any of the modules, and I feel like, despite the fact I've played D&D for decades, like we never really did, like a Greyhawk adventure. Like we did
Right.
some Greyhawk inspired stuff, but we don't know the same. We don't have the same universe
You
familiarity.
guys never did Ravenloft or anything?
We did like Ravenloft inspired stuff, but we didn't do anything
You
like
didn't sit there with the book and go
right
through.
strictly
Okay.
with the book, which was one of the things I like about D&D, because like you can still have a shared experience even though you haven't occupied the same exact universe as someone else. All of that being said, are there any modules or old campaigns that you played that were like by the book that you look back fondly on?
Again, I think I'm the bad person to start this. The only one I really played, and this actually reminds me of the question you asked earlier about favorite character. I had a fighter named Beef, and we played Fandelver for like 2 hours, and then a couple weeks later, I went to a game shop in Burbank and sat down in the middle of them playing Curse of Strahd, and they're in the Amber Temple or something like. You're supposed to be like level 12, and I'm a level 1 fighter.
Nice.
And in the process of those 2.5 hours, he went from level 1 to like level 7 or something like
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
They're like protecting him. That was actually a really exciting time. But that one really appeals to me just because of the all the horror themes and cool vampires and werewolves seems pretty sweet. But one day I'd like to get to that, try that.
No, people love the Curse of Strahd. They did a really good job of that on this run around. I remember the 2nd edition version of the Ravenloft stuff was terrible. It was just total death trap all the time and no escape, and just no fun. But it was them first trying to play with horror rules for the game. It's kind of a new thing.
It seems to bring in a different, you have fantasy, you have all those fantasy tropes, but then that kind of introduces a little bit of a different genre to the game. I think it allows for more fun, of course.
Yeah, and I think that was one of the fun things about the different modules and campaigns, especially around second edition, because I feel like that's when they were really trying to expand and say, maybe we don't just focus on the high fantasy side of things. That's a very limited audience. Let's adapt the rules a bit and let's get horror. Let's get
Spelljammer came out then.
I fucking hate Spelljammer.
You don't like mixing your fantasy and your sci-fi?
No. When it comes to D&D, like I'm a very high fantasy person. And that's just, and I know that there's no right or wrong way to do it.
Preference.
That's just my personal preference for it.
Yeah, I used to be that way forever. Now I'm like, whatever, anything goes, It's a lot of the early settings, that was kind of the idea. It was supposed to, if you read the history of Greyhawk, it's a fantasy world, medieval sort of technology level and everything. But, recently there was this huge apocalypse where, 2/3 of the world destroyed itself in this magical war. These super wizards blasted each other with, it reads like nukes. And it's perfectly 80s. And that just goes straight into the Gamma world and all of that sort of stuff, and going and raiding tombs of ancient, what is this, technology, magic? You don't know.
It's all the same from a certain perspective, right?
Well, yeah, iPad is a magic mirror, right?
Mm-hmm.
More than that. Yeah.
What about,
Oracle.
What about you, Frank? Any old campaigns or modules?
I would say definitely the Planescape setting.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's
yeah.
quality.
Yeah, it was funny because like you mentioned before about how when we were in high school we'd go on these trips to academic decathlons and stuff, and
we were really popular, by the way. I just want to reemphasize that.
This is how we were spending our Saturdays, honestly. Strangely enough, Eagle Pass itself opened up a bookstore back when there were bookstores like Walden Books and B. Dalton Booksellers, and so it was on one of the trips where we were just in our hometown that we saw this setting for second edition for Planescape, and so we bought it. I think that was one of the ones we like split the money or something and bought it.
It came with that CD.
Yeah,
Oh.
it came with a CD from like ambient
And
music.
yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
I need to find that.
It was awesome.
Yeah, I think I actually saw a set recently on eBay, so it's still out there. But yeah, it came with like a map of the main city.
Oh, that was one of the box set.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Fun.
that was a
Yeah.
box set. Yeah. So that was a lot of fun. And that was actually the first time I ever co-DM'd because I co-DM'd with Gus. And we would it even had like a glossary on the specific slang words that they use in the planes and all that stuff. So
That was popular then. Shadowrun did that a lot too.
Shadowrun did it too.
Was that Jeff Grubb, I think?
I don't remember.
Planescape?
Do you remember any slang?
What's that?
Do you remember any of the slang?
That's right, Burke. I do remember some of the slang. There were so many. What was it? Like Cutter. That was one of my favorites. Like instead of saying "Hey man," it's like "Hey Cutter, what up?"
All right.
So yeah, and like I think we ran a few sessions in that world, and
It was always so chaotic, and that was one of the things I liked about that was you never knew what to expect. It still kept things high fantasy, but it was a world where any potential doorway could become a portal if you had the right key with you.
Oh, yeah.
And at any moment you could end up somewhere else. And it was hard at the end of last season of Heroes and Halfwits to kind of separate personal knowledge of that from character knowledge, because as soon as we went through the portal, I knew where we were. I knew what was going on. I was like, fuck. I can't.
You stuck in Sigil.
Right, it's like I have to know, in character. I don't know what's going on, but Gus, the player, knows what has happened and where we are. So again, that goes back to what I was talking about earlier. Like it's kind of nice in a way to not have all of that baggage and go in fresh and not like, oh well, this and then this and that.
Do you actually resolve that, or I mean, it's got to be hard to ignore something you know.
Yeah, it's hard.
Do you just play like you don't? Or?
Sometimes, I mean, I try to keep it out of my mind, but sometimes I slip. I know I've slipped many times.
Yeah.
Where
but you've also said like, does my character, does Borealis know what this is, and you would make a roll. So I think that's a good
Pretty
way
good way to
resolve
handle
that.
it.
Yeah.
And also, I mean, if you don't have your character do stuff in game that directly benefits from your knowledge, that's kind of where I draw that line.
I got you.
Yeah, no insider trading in D&D.
Yeah, it's cheating, man.
Yeah.
Just got to keep that long-term storage locked away in the back.
Cheating at D&D is kind of a ridiculous thing to think. Like, what's the point?
Yeah.
Is that
Yeah, I feel like
just getting one over on your buddies?
Yeah.
well, I mean, just trying to get like more loot or trying
Yeah.
to
Doesn't make
succeed in
sense.
the battle.
Fudging dice rolls and
Yeah.
stuff like that. Yeah.
So I have a theory about this, and I could be totally full of it, but I feel like the cheating aspect comes in because it's linked to gambling. Because like I don't know about
Desire to
anyone else,
win.
huh?
And a desire to win.
A desire to win, but yeah, because there's like that probability and you're rolling dice. I feel like it's kind of the same, shot of adrenaline and whatever that you get when you gamble and you like roll good at a craps table. And so, what should be just kind of because there's no money involved, like D&D should just be fun and you're just playing with your friends. But I think that like competitiveness and that weirdness of like over addiction into gambling kind of bleeds into D&D sometimes, and that's what the min-maxing is all about and rules lawyering and that kind of thing.
Yeah, at Class of 1980X, you saw that a lot where, so much excitement about one roll, and if it's good or bad, it just gets everybody so worked up. Yeah, there's a temptation there, I think, for some people to be like, I won, I did it,
Yeah.
And it just,
It's kind of hard to win D&D, though, right? You can win that fight, but
right.
He continued the fight. So when I have very, very limited experience DMing. I think maybe I did that co-campaign with you once, and that might be about the extent of it. But one of the things I've always liked in the Heroes and Halfwits campaign is that you do all of your DM rolls out in front of everyone. Like you know, the DM screen is there normally to hide the rolls.
Yeah.
Like when we were co-DMing, I was always very careful to do it behind the screen, because if things went too badly for the players, I wanted to maybe kind of like, well, maybe it wasn't as bad, or if things went
Cushion
too good
blow
for
a little
them, it's like,
bit.
maybe knock them down a peg. But your rolls are always like right there, right in front of me. Like, well, I can see exactly
Yeah.
where it went. Do you have like a reason you do it that way?
Yeah, I actually feel like it makes the game more exciting and unpredictable that way, because then, if one of the NPCs I'm controlling really messes up, then yeah, that's what happened, and the party benefits. And then the other extreme where, for example, when Jeff is doing stuff with messing with wild magic, I like to do those percentage dice to see what the effect is, just so that it's very clear, like, he actually did just drain life from everyone in the room around him. I just feel like it adds that like excitement and unpredictability.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's one of those, how do you dungeon master questions? Are you going to manage the story, or are you going to be an impartial referee who, lets the dice fall as they may?
What are the most frustrating player traits that you've encountered so far, or the most frustrating thing you have to deal with on a regular basis?
Jeff.
Oh, for me, I think one of the things that is a little frustrating is we don't play enough. So every time we do a season break, we'll come back and they'll kind of have forgotten how to play D&D. So that's a little troublesome, but I don't know, they're all pretty good. I think I'm just rolling with it. So
In
Don't
Jeff
bother
speak,
me.
that's what do I add to that?
yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah. You've played whatever 40 hours of D&D, but you still can't figure out how to do an attack roll versus a damage roll. That is actually really, really frustrating.
Right, where they just can't pick up the rules for whatever reason.
I mean, maybe it's been 2 months since they played, but still, it's like the most basic mechanic of the game. Try and remember that one.
Roll a d20,
Yeah.
add something.
There you go. I've gotten to do that where I just like roll 20. I don't know, just roll 20 sided.
What you
Figure it
get?
out.
Tell me what you got. You
No, but
fail.
I definitely, I'm not as brave as Frank. I definitely hide all of my rolls because I think that makes my job a lot easier because I can just, make up whatever I want. I try and be really good about going by what I do roll, but sometimes I feel like that complicates it too much for someone who's new to it.
Well, I think another advantage to hiding your role is you can roll for no reason.
Yeah.
And
That freaks people out.
Right.
Yeah.
And they don't
Start doing
what
that
you're
when-
rolling. Right.
No, I'm not making a stealth check for a monster. Don't worry about it.
Yeah. What about you, Adam? What were your biggest pet peeve or the biggest challenge with the players?
The people who, get real upset when things go wrong. When I started playing, as basic D&D, AD&D, in my high school game, the first game I really played, my first 4 characters all died, like in the first session that they played. You know, I went through a druid, a ranger, and 2 paladins before my third paladin finally stuck. And it's just part of the game, you know. But people get really attached to their characters if they've made a backstory. You know, I appreciate that. I mean, I'm the same way when I've written something up like that. But you know, if you have a player who like really reacts badly when you kill their character, it disincentivizes you from doing that, and it throws the game off, in my opinion. You know, so that's probably my biggest pet peeve. You gotta, you know, it's just a game. You know.
Well, I think the first one of us that kills one of these people is probably going to get a lot of really mad people. Like, I can't. If you killed off Bojingles, I'm sure. Like,
Yeah.
That's exactly who I thought of also.
people are going to come after you with a pitchfork.
Yeah.
Frank.
Apparently some people are in support of that idea.
Can we get a voice vote?
Yeah, one of them is at the table right now. What about you, Frank?
Yeah, I think that, dealing with player or with character death is a tricky issue. I guess, you know, it took me a while to kind of empathize with that, because I used to, I mean, I guess I still am not really so attached to a character that I'm playing that if they die, I get that upset. Like, you know, Adam ran a game called Savage Tide, or a campaign called Savage Tide.
Great campaign.
Yeah, really great, but very difficult. And I had like 3 characters that
Oh, yeah.
rolled up and crafted lovingly that died right away in like the first 3 levels of that game. So, but yeah, I don't take it seriously. It's like, okay, well, that was fun. Now I can go on to a new character concept. But I get it now when I'm DMing and you know, a character ends up dying and the player gets really upset. But actually now, like, what I do is, you know, I'll give him an out, like, hey, maybe the rest of the party can go on a quest to raise enough money to get a priest to resurrect you.
I mean, it's an opportunity to tell a new story.
Yeah.
You know, like how one of you died. Now what do you do?
I think
Yeah.
it would be great for each of the sets in each of the series to incorporate a paper shredder into the side.
Oh yeah.
And if someone dies, just immediately take the character sheet and put it in the shredder.
No, my friend who
You're like,
When
No.
it's Jeff's turn, you can just get it running.
that's it. It's over.
And especially bring it out like right before they're about to go into a dungeon crawl.
Okay, guys.
Or it could be like a satisfying thing where, like, if you have sheets for the enemies they fight, whoever kills it can take the sheet, put it in there. But then if they die, you're taking their sheet
Yeah.
and you're tossing it right in there too.
That is
Let's
really-
do this, guys.
I think the most frustrating thing I've had to deal with during Heroes and Halfwits is the fact that nobody understands percentile die. 2d10s.
Oh man, yeah.
How many
yeah.
times are we going to argue about what it means, about which is the tens die and which is the single digit
Christ.
die?
I
Yeah.
don't know.
In high school, we actually developed a method for this. You know, because a lot of us didn't have the die with the tens place on it, and the rule was from the roller's perspective, you read them left to right, top to bottom.
Okay.
Period. Everybody, every time.
Maybe we should do a post show where it's just a tutorial on percentage.
How to roll percentile dice.
I feel like we've had multiple episodes where we explain it. It's still,
Oh, yeah.
Get some shot callers for the guys. You know.
It's not sticking. But also the same thing you were talking about, where how many times am I going to tell Jeff what he has to add to an attack roll?
And he's been doing it for 25 years.
Yeah. How many times are we like, no, that's not the right die? It's written right there next to your weapon.
He needs pictures. You know, of the dice.
I think for those of you who want to go on Twitter and tell us how many times we have to talk about percentage rolls, I think there you go.
Well, a lot of your show is arguing with each other.
Yeah.
right?
Oh man.
It's part of the fun.
How many times am I going to hear, well, what does it mean when you roll 2 zeros and then another 0?
That's 1,000.
No, that's 0. It's like, no, there is no 0. You can't roll a die and get 0. It's impossible.
I think Orma's been confused about danger sense a few times too.
Yep. So yeah, that's like just the constant reminders of what is going on and what's what. So we have about 15 minutes left. I did want to have some time here at the end for some Q&A, and I see that there's a couple of microphones set up.
Yeah.
So if people have questions, if you want to line up, please run and push each other aside. As you
Remember, it's a competition and it's important.
You know, make them roll.
Yeah. Oh, we don't have a
Roll
D20.
off. Damn.
Normally, what I do on D&D panels is when someone comes up to ask a question, I roll a d20, and if it's a 1, they have to sit down without asking. And if it's a 20, they get to ask.
I have an
Thank you,
RNG
miss.
on my phone, so.
Thank you so much.
If it's a 1,
Thank you.
And by getting in line, you're agreeing to this. If we roll and it's a 1, you have to sit down. If it's a 20, you get to ask 2 questions.
There you go.
So we'll start down here with Dan. I'll let you roll first. Oh, wait, pick left or right before you.
I like left.
Got a 7. 7 on the die.
All right, I
What's it-
survived. Congratulations to me. What's the longest argument you guys have had during D&D? Like over the shopping episode or percentile die? And how long was it?
Well,
I felt like the first half of 1980X was one big argument. You know?
yeah, I feel like within one session, probably when the Mordenkainen's disjunction happened and
Oh,
that
yeah.
player basically walked out for the rest of the 2 or 3 hours that we played.
Yeah.
So
I think the closest thing I got was I think Lawrence had played D&D once or twice in high school, but it was a different edition. So when we first started playing, he kept not understanding how magic worked at all and trying to do it some way from 4 or something like that. So I feel like I spent 20 minutes with Lawrence trying to figure out spell attack bonus or something like that one day. And of course, I didn't know it well enough to like really tell him he doesn't know what he's talking about, and he doesn't react well to that kind of thing anyway. So
Yeah, I feel like that. I mean, to that point, I feel like spell attack bonus is still not clearly spelled out in the player's handbook. Like, there's a couple of different places you have to look depending on the kind of spellcaster you are.
if you're a wizard or druid or whatever,
Right. There's not like a this is this and then add this every level. So
Right.
it's like
Not in the combat section.
yeah, add this modifier plus this depending on your level.
Well, and it's the other thing. You know, we shoot every couple weeks, so he's forgotten by 3 weeks later. Does not remember that half an hour argument we had.
Okay. You want to roll for the right side?
Yeah, right side? Okay, what do we got here? 17. What's your question?
So I was hoping for some advice. I'm currently GMing a Pathfinder campaign, and I am trying to make it also a horror campaign. So I'm trying to combine horror and then heroic gameplay.
Yeah.
And I was wondering if you had any suggestions on how I might better scare my players.
Well, I mean, that's going to be down to your players a little bit and their characters, right? So if their characters have any particular phobias or fears that, you want to play on that type of stuff.
I think you
More
should get
like
a fog
crafting
machine.
A scary story for my actual players, not even just their characters, but scaring them through the storytelling.
Yeah, I mean, what I
Yeah.
think of
There's
is like
going to be a lot of
Lovecraftian
Yeah,
stuff.
the
and-
unknown, monsters coming out of nowhere, their own, questioning their own sanity is a good one. You can always work in some type of mechanic where you keep track of like wisdom damage to the characters and, maybe in secret even. And, their perceptions are off based on how much, horror they've absorbed already.
there
there was
is
a-
also
Go ahead, you go.
in the Dungeon Master's Guide for 5th edition, there's a madness table too, so which is great. I actually used that a little bit when they were first journeying through the jungle. So that's a good thing to use to like kind of determine whether the players are becoming really unstable or not too.
There's a not at all D&D related, but there's a great GameCube game called Eternal Darkness that I thought handled player sanity and insanity very well. If you see a cheap GameCube and you can pick up Eternal Darkness for a couple bucks,
Maybe
I
there's
say,
some YouTube footage of it.
yeah, watch it on YouTube, play through it, or watch some video footage of it. I thought that game did a really good job of letting horror sink in.
Also, don't underestimate the use of like mood lighting, right? Like if you play in a darkened room, there's there's things you can do to kind of psychologically evoke that fear with your players.
Watch some really good horror movies.
Yeah, whatever.
Pay attention to what they do to kind of scare the viewer. Maybe just steal those ideas.
Yeah.
Awesome.
I
Thanks,
still
guys.
think a fog machine's a good idea.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'll think about that one. All right,
Thanks.
thank you.
Left side. Damn, 12.
Yes. Yes. I was wondering from a technical perspective, besides Jeff, what has been the most troublesome for the episodes for recording and whatnot?
You guys
Frank-
probably have a hard time getting everyone together.
Frank not figuring out how to full screen a map image. Well, every episode, we have to spend half an hour. Why is the menu still up here? I don't know.
Yeah, pebcac. I found the glare
I did
off the
figure it out
screen was a little annoying.
Yeah, we have a lot of glare too off
Yeah.
that giant TV.
Yeah.
But it is also really challenging for us to get everyone together. I mean, we all live and work in the same office, but those dudes are really, really busy, and it's like all of our personalities, and Omar and me. So it just
On a schedule.
production shuts down for an entire day for us to be able to do the show. So it's not like a challenge, but it's a limitation of how much we can do it by just how much time it takes.
Yeah, we have that challenge, like you said, everyone's schedule, and also we have to deal with the schedule for the broadcast space where we film, because they film so many other shows. It's like we have a limited window of opportunity where everyone else's schedule has to match up and meet.
Yeah, we get like 1 day a week, every other week, or something like that.
I would also say wrangling Mr. Patillo in to do the ad goblin reads. Sometimes
Patillo.
that can be a little challenging. Yeah, I think the schedules definitely are an issue. But also, what you were kind of pointing out, Dan, with your group, sometimes we don't get to shoot until it's like several weeks have passed, and the newer players especially kind of like start to lose their grasp on the game, which is why I think like the percentage dice question comes up and all that stuff. Like there were some times where we filmed like on consecutive weeks, and the gameplay noticeably improved because the players remembered the rules. Sure. So.
Yeah, the first episode or two every season is a struggle just to ramp up back into it.
Yeah.
I think it's your turn to roll for the right side.
All right.
You know.
So we've only ever had a 1 once before.
18.
And
So
then
close.
someone else later rolled a 20 in the same session, and he gave his second question back to the person
Back
who
to
didn't
them.
get one.
Yeah.
Sounds too kind.
Yeah.
So
nice
either as
even
a-
distribution.
Yeah.
Either as a DM or a player, what's the meanest thing you've ever done in a campaign, other than stealing from your friends, Gus?
Stealing was a good one.
So
I guess friends is a strong word.
I don't think this was mean on my part because I had an honorable intention here, but the players did not like this. It was one of the times I was guest DMing in Adam's World, and they travel. It was actually the first time I ever ran a Jackalheart campaign, and what happened was that we had a guy who we were playing with who had a really high level monk, and he was like amazing and really tough. And I had this thought of like, what if he just became a vampire but kept his monk abilities? Like, he would be really badass. And so, but where I erred was I didn't tell him about my plan beforehand because I wanted it to be a surprise, and I thought it'd be a really cool plot point. So we get to this
He
battle.
wasn't too into it.
He wasn't, no. And so we got into this battle with the Githyanki Queen, who, if any of you know the mythology, she's a vampire, a really high-level one. And so they had this epic battle, and then Verkin, the monk, got captured by her. He was grappled by her, and she bit him and turned him into a vampire. And he was furious. He was so mad, and he was like, "You just ruined my character," and blah blah blah. He like walked out also in that particular section.
Yeah, it's like
So-
a strictly lawful good monk.
Yeah.
And suddenly he's a vampire. He's like, I can't
Which-
do this.
Yeah, which I had a whole plan, like his god was going to forgive him, and he'd be like saved eventually, and all this stuff. But yeah, no,
Yeah.
he didn't know any of that at the time, and just was furious.
So communication is key.
It is, yeah.
Yeah. Make sure you get consent before you turn your PCs into vampires.
Will do. I'm probably too nice. I don't have a good story there. But I think the maddest anyone I got was when I randomly gave, I think it was Lawrence 22 extra XP or
Oh,
something that no one else got. And they were really, really fucking pissed about 22 experience points.
It happened.
I'm way too nice of a DM.
Even in our campaign, everyone's like, "What are you at?" And we're all within
Yeah.
like 15 of each other, but people get really mad about that. We need to get to a situation where we get just enough XP for 1 or 2 people to level, but not everyone.
That'd be a nightmare.
Oh man.
I think for me, it was probably the end of the epic game that I ran for Frank and everybody. You know, they'd all been working out of this kingdom for a while, and I wanted to actually stole this straight out of H.P. Lovecraft, the doom that came to Sarnath. You know, basically a city by the sea. It's hugely prosperous. I mean, mostly as a result of the players. And then a giant sea monster comes out and just flattens the whole place. You know, it's like Godzilla scenario, right?
Sweet.
And they were all 25th level, so it was time for the campaign to be over. And so the monster was going to come out, it was going to destroy the city, and it was going to kill all the PCs. And so I ran that, and they hated it. They didn't like, even though every one of their characters like ascended to, you know, mythical demigodhood, you know, they still hated getting beaten by this monster.
In my defense, I will say the coyote embraced that, because remember he got onto the highest parapet of the tower of the castle and just leapt off of it with 2 katanas and
Right into its
right
mouth.
into the mouth of the monster.
Yeah, that's beautiful, Frank.
Thanks.
Very poetic.
All right, where would be this side again?
Yeah.
It was 11. So what's up?
I was my group's designated DM because they're a new group a while back, and they loved my story, but not my DMing style. Now that I know what the heck I'm doing is because I've played before, do you have any suggestions to get players excited for a new campaign I may be DMing?
I feel like they should be excited for the fact that you're willing to sit down and DM for them, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, dungeon mastering is, you know, it's essential, and it's hard work, and it's often thankless, you know? I mean, so they should just be glad you're running a game for them.
Make them jealous by finding new friends and playing D&D with them.
That requires friends.
Hire them.
Friendly local game store. You
Yeah,
know, I've met a lot of cool people by putting up a flyer at the game store. You know, hey, new game. You know, people contact us, and yeah, good friends today, Kevin Gates.
I will say I have met some of the nicest random people just trying to walk into a game store and learn how to play D&D. People are so welcoming and so cool that if anyone wants to play and doesn't have like friends in real life, doesn't want to do Roll20, try and find a board game store and just put up a flyer, and you will find cool people.
Well, and a lot of them these days run organized play stuff,
Yeah,
so you can
Adventures
just
League.
jump in and Adventures League, great way to learn, and conventions too.
Yeah.
On Friday, I ran into a guy. I was doing an autograph signing, and I ran into this guy who was like super sunburned. And I was like, "What happened?" He goes, "Oh, I walked somewhere, and I guess it's a lot hotter than I thought here in Austin." I was like, "Where did you walk?" And he couldn't remember. He couldn't tell me. But later in the night,
Having sunstroke.
he tweeted me his Google Maps of where he walked from. He walked from Dragon's Lair down to the convention center.
What?
It's 7.2 miles if you're not from Austin.
In the Texas sun.
I
I'm
wouldn't-
surprised he made it.
I wouldn't want to drive that. So, that guy obviously very dedicated to go to Dragon's Lair. It's a huge game store here in town. You want to roll?
Oh, yeah.
for right
What are
side?
we on the right here?
Yeah.
Oh.
Oh no!
So sorry. Hey, that's the dice. Get in the back of the line. Get in
He's
the back
pretty
of the line.
gracious about
All
it.
right, let's see. Over here on the left. 4. You got close.
4. Oh, that's
Numerous.
dangerous. As a group of people who do a lot of homebrew stuff, what do you find the most difficult part of starting a story like that?
Not starting in a tavern.
Nothing wrong with the tavern.
Good old tavern.
There's nothing wrong with starting in a tavern. It's a trope for a reason. But okay, so I do a lot of homebrew. I've done huge campaigns that have slowly built into worlds. And the way that I always start is you start small, and you build on that. So I might start with a map of just a region, you know, one little village and a couple features and a little story there, right? And then, okay, the players finish that. What's next? What's next door? What's the next kingdom? Just build it one piece at a time. You know, if you don't want to do the work yourself, go to unicornrampant.com, and my whole campaign is there.
Yeah, I think start small is probably the best advice. You play for a little while with your
Hold on.
players, and
No,
you
number 1. Is he leaving? The other was
Back-
number 1, right?
Oh no!
Hey, number 1. Come over here. All right, go ahead. Sorry.
No, it's all right. You'll play with them for a bit and maybe learn also more of the kind of game they want to play. So you should, like, if you're really going to ruin a lot of your good time if you spend months creating this huge world and then they get in it and they want to go to the moon or something
Right.
like that. So don't get too far ahead of them and kind of mold what you're doing for what they are actually seem to be interested in playing.
All right. Well, that is our time. We're out of time.
Oh, geez.
Come see us after the panel over here right now. Number 1. I feel bad for you, so we'll talk to you off the panel. So thanks everyone for coming out.
Thanks.
Thanks,
you
everyone.
guys very
Enjoy
much.
RTX.